Yeah, well, we have just discussed how Christian religion, which is being sort of guided by the Western ideas or Western science and technology, happens to pretty much lethal and then seen to be much more responsible for the present ecological crisis which we are facing now. Now, moving a bit different from what Christian religion talks about, we'll try to look at how to locate the Buddhist teaching, if not the kind of biodiversity conservation ethics which prevails in Buddhism. And I'm sure you all know like how Buddhism or the religion Buddhism emerges and who is the founder. So I need not go into detail, presuming that you all know what Buddhism and then how Buddhism was founded. Now, we'll try to discuss few points what are being addressed in some of the classical religious textbooks of Buddhism, of their sort of closeness to nature. Now, Buddhism in a way view humanity as an integral part of nature, so that when nature is defiled, people ultimately suffer. That is, if we are causing some kind of a negative act, the consequences in a way will be, how people stands to not just ultimately be harmed. Now, therefore, these negative consequences arises when the culture in a way alienate themselves from nature, and when people feel separate from and become aggressive towards the natural system. And also when we abuse nature, we tend to forget that we are also abusing ourselves, because this is because when we sort of create a dualism between human and nature, or maybe rather a dichotomy relationship is maintained. Now, when we see human pretty much close and in relationship with nature, we won't really engage ourselves in harming and abuse nature. Now, one of the books on this Buddhism, that is the Jataka, in a way also glorified the birth stories of Buddhism, and also that is Buddha, which are abundant with poetic appreciations of nature. That is, if you look at the Jataka, then in every passages there are importance which are given on the forest, waters, and earth's wild creatures. And the arts and aesthetics are pretty much being enshrined in the book of this Jataka. And almost all Buddhist literature in a way states that the Buddha was born in a grove of sal, that is a lovely straight back trees with large leaves. This sal tree in a way is also sacred to many religious groups, particularly Buddhism and Hinduism. And the Buddha's father, in a way, in his search for this quest for this enlightenment, was in the company of a banyan, and as we said, the ultimate, that is the enlightenment, was under the spreading branches of a tree, and which was recognized for its special place in human faith, even in its scientific name, that is the Ficus religiosa, that is the scientific name. Therefore, the tree or the forest happens to be right from the period when Buddha was born, and at the same time till the time when he attained his enlightenment, he was pretty much close to nature and then live in the forest rather. And if you look at the early Buddhist community, which were small in numbers, they tend to live in forests under large trees, in caves and in mountain areas. I'm sure, like, if you all have visited the state in Orissa, wherein a place in Hathigumpa where the monks normally during the period of Asoka, so to say, happens to live in forests, normally under the cave of a stone. Now, this early Buddhist community live in forests, under large trees, in caves and in mountainous areas. So, I presume that the place in that Hathigumpa in Orissa is still something which one can witness and visualize how the early Buddhist monks could have survived and live in the natural surroundings. And as a result of this, they are directly dependent on nature, and they cultivate great respect for beauty and diversity of their natural surroundings. Every healthy forest is also a home for wildlife. So, when a monk accepts the forest as his home, he also respects the animals who live in the forest. That is, the animals are not seen as something which is different, but also a part, or a family rather, members of the family. The early Buddhists maintained this kind of friendly attitude towards their natural surroundings and opposed the destruction of forests or their wildlife. Now, therefore, since they have that direct exposure to the environment or to the natural surroundings, they tend to sort of perceive or the attitude they have shown to the natural surrounding is that they should not destroy the forest or the wildlife, or rather they should not be harmed. Now, in the portion in this, the Sutta-Nipata, one of the earliest texts of the Buddha, says that know ye the grasses and trees, then know ye the worms and the moths and the different sorts of ants. Know ye also the four-footed animals, small and great, the serpents, the fish which reigns in the water, the birds that are borne along on wings and more through the air. Know ye the marks that constitute species are theirs, and their species are manifold. Now, therefore, it in a way highlight that one needs to be familiar and then pretty much have a wider knowledge and understanding of not just the immediate surrounding, but what us, not just the human, but also the other grasses, trees, the animals, even the tiniest one. So, therefore, its species in a way contribute or have their own purposes. Now, therefore, Buddha in a way was pretty much in support of people's perception and understanding of knowledge. Now, what is this, the precept of Buddhism? That is the principles or the guiding principles of Buddhism. Remember, each and every religion has their own guiding principles, or maybe on the foundation on which it is being founded. Now, the first precept of Buddhism explicitly says that do not kill. That is, one should not engage in harmful activities, violence. This precept is not merely a legalistic prohibition, but a realization of our affinity with all who share the gift of life. That is, a compassionate heart provides a firm ground for this precept. Now, the first and foremost, for ones to not engage in killing something, is to have a compassionate heart. That is, if you have that compassionate heart, towards anything, you can in a way have that kind of symbiotic relationship with the species. The community of monks are also in a way forbidden by the Vinaya, that is one of the texts, the ancient rules of conduct, from eating 10 different kinds of meat, mostly animals of the forest, that is which are not domesticated. The Buddha in a way taught his disciple to in a way communicate to animals their wishes for peace and happiness. So, if one have this compassionate at heart, one can maintain a peace and happiness even with their fellow animals. Now, these are some of the precepts of Buddhism, that is the founding principles. Now, Buddha also in a way talks pretty much eloquently on water conservation, that is how the Buddha set down rules forbidding his disciples to contaminate water resources, not to engage in polluting or putting a waste on resources. For example, monks were in a way dissuaded from throwing their waste or left our food into rivers and lakes, and they were also urged to guard the lives of all living beings abiding there, that is not just contaminating or polluting, but rather to necessarily protect and then guard the lives of all living beings which are inhabiting that place. Now, in the Vinaya Pitaka, there are detailed descriptions of how to build toilets in water wells. In a way, you can compare with the present or the current government, which strongly sort of projected the idea of the Swachh Bharat campaign of not engaging in the littering and then open defecation, of which every household are supposedly to have a toilet. Now, this is something which we are talking about the medieval period or much earlier than that. Now, in the Vinaya Pitaka, there are detailed descriptions of how to build toilets and water wells. Now, which means every kind of garbage or something which are unwanted should not be spread, rather it has to be exposed in a more hygienic manner. Now, therefore, it not only talk about this conservation of water, but also rather maintaining of hygienic sanitation. One of the 8 qualities of the ocean is cleanliness, and another is that it must be the abode of various kinds of fish, and not necessarily fish, but also other creatures, as you all know, like tortoise, so on and so forth. Now, therefore, if you look at the present ecological crisis which we are facing now, we all know how the oceans are being polluted, and then as a result of this contamination, we also seldom witness big fishes which are being killed, swallowing up of those plastic items, toxic items, so on and so forth. Now, perhaps these great minds or great intellects, I would say, the enlightened, they were in a way being guided, or they might have foreseen that if one wants to have a healthy, or if not to live in a very safe environment, one should not engage in polluting, because the amount of waste dumping, the toxic items which are being disposed of not only to the ocean but also to every parts of the earth surface, in a way we are facing the brunt of it, because we abuse and then we are facing the brunt and the consequences. This is something more to do with sort of a cyclical or a chained reaction. Now, we cannot afford to see things in a more non-linear way, or maybe in a more non-repetitive rather. Sorry. Now, Buddhism in a way also holds a great respect for and gratitude towards nature. That is, they tend to perceive nature as the mother that gives rise to all the joyful things in life. So, in a way, the idea of this Mother Earth is something which is also being followed by Buddhism. That is, in terms of their respect and gratitude towards nature. Now, if you look at the Metta Sutta, thus as a mother with her own life girds the life of her own child, let all embracing thoughts for all that lives be thine. So, this sort of respect and mutual caring and nurturing is something which is also explicitly spelled out in the Metta Sutta of the Buddhist text. Now, in one of the lectures of His Holiness the Dalai Lama, that is the 14th Dalai Lama of Tibet, who also is a strong supporter or strong proponent of Buddhism, in a way has repeatedly his concern for the environmental protection. That is, he raised an idea that our ancestors viewed the earth as rich, bountiful and sustainable, because if one wants to flourish and then stay as a human or a people, one needs to sort of take care of the surroundings in a more responsible way. Now, therefore, if we consistently engage in harming and then exploiting the nature, this idea of this rich, bountiful and sustainable will perish, and then it will be reversed, that is the other way around. Now, therefore, the Dalai Lama, who is also in a way propagating and then professing Buddhism, also expressed his strong concern for the environmental protection in the international forum. Now, we also know that this is the case, but only that is if we take care of it. In one of his recent speeches on the subject of ecology, he pointed out that the most important thing is to have a peaceful heart, that is a compassionate heart. So, if one deviate from this or maybe be obsessed with this hatred, jealousy, greed, then there is no solution to it. So, the only way out or the only solution is to have a compassionate or a peaceful heart. That is only how we take care of things around us. Now, there is a place in Thailand where the Buddhist monks are engaged in the wildlife fund project, wherein they tame and domesticate those animals, and it happens to be a very successful project, because if you have maintained that kind of balance and that sort of a compassion with the animals, it in a way tends to espouse the kind of the richness and the bountiful and sustainable possibilities of the earth's surface. Only when we know the true, we understand the true nature lying within, we can live harmoniously with the rest of the natural world. So, in a way, self-realization is also important. That is, to realize the basic essence of nature. In fact, Buddhism can be meaningful only when it is relevant to our everyday life and to our environment. Now, having said that, as mentioned in the religious texts of maybe to engage not in harming or to engage in violence, also one should engage in conservation of water or maybe the nature. But all having said, and how it is to be executed, that is, if we are in a way to see the relevance of Buddhism in the present context, and how are we going to apply the application or the implementation part is something which we all need to sort of reckon with. Now, the Buddhist tradition in a way counsels us to treasure and conserve nature, of which human beings are an active part. That is, in our everyday life we are in constant engagement, and we can in a way do a bit of conserving nature. Now, as we had partly discussed in the ecological crisis, from the viewpoint of the Christian religion, of how Christian religion, which is guided by the Western science or Western science, modern science and modern technology, in a way is responsible and have affected the nature or exploit or abuse nature like anything. But in the context of Buddhism again, way back from the 16th century, how Buddhism emerged, and the founding father, that is Gautama Buddha, in a way denounced worldly pleasure, that is accumulation of wealth and certain other worldly pleasures, and also explicitly pointed out that not only to engage, to abstain oneself from harming or polluting, if not using violence against nature, but also to partake in the uplifting, if not protecting nature, and this in a way will be able to maintain healthy and the bountiful bliss and nature, or the beautiful nature can in a way be realized, and how a sustainable world can be established. So, the question which remains from what we have discussed is how to make or how to situate the relevance of Buddhism in the present context, or it in a way allow us to to contextualize us in a position of retrospection, how we try to position ourselves in nature. Are we in a position to do things in a free will, or in a much more take part in protecting nature? So, you can refer this on the Buddhism, that is the early Buddhist views on nature, which it's an extract from the book by Alan Hunt Badiner, and which is written by Kapil Singh. So, you can perhaps read this, and it's a few pages of chapter, and then this can help you. And we'll be discussing more on the Hinduism and the response of Pope John Paul, of how they are trying to in a way retaliate the kind of stance which is being posited by Lynn White. Thank you.